Hey there, everybody. Peace and love. I hope that everybody is doing well today. What is today's date? The 18th of July, 2021. Went on earlier today, a church website, Transforming Love Community, and ran into some technical challenges. So hopefully it'll work out well today. I'm going to just put that vibe out there that this is going to work well this time, better than it did a couple hours ago, where somehow we had to start over a couple times. But this time I'm coming through StreamYard, as I usually do when broadcasting live on my own Facebook page and in the Transcending the Matrix group and on YouTube at Matrix Healing. So I hope everybody is well today. I'm hoping that you all are feeling bountifully and brightly blessed, as always. In fact, I hope that this day is for you each and every day, certainly including today. Okay. All right. So just going to kind of give a moment for anybody to show up. I love you. I love me too. You love you too. All that's in there is some water, some warm water, kind of hot, not all the way hot. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. Greetings to everybody again. Peace and love to you all. We're coming back for another opportunity to be able to share some love, some light, some grace, some peace, hopefully to help you feel empowered in the process. If you stop by, we always love to see your comments, even if you're just saying hello. That's the only way that we know who's actually here. Even if you like or love or whatever, we're not able to see who's actually here until you actually post a comment. But we're always very, very thankful to be able to receive whatever comments you're graciously posting. So thank you for that in advance. And it's nice to know who's here. Anyway, I'm Royce Fletcher Thomason. I'm here for another edition of the opportunity to share again some love and light. Today we're dealing with this theme. I spoke at the Church Transforming Love Community earlier today, and essentially similar type message that I'm going to share with you today. I've been dealing with the theme all month at TLC of overstand it. Overstand it. You may or may not have heard the term overstand in your lifetime. Perhaps you have, perhaps you haven't. It's distinguished a little bit from understanding. According to Urban Dictionary, a distinction between overstanding and understanding is a matter of authority. Okay, you see is actually as part of my background, the scripture that comes from the book of Luke in the chapter 10. And what you see posted right there, and actually I can share with you in a way that you can see a little bit clearly because I'm not standing in the way of it. The whole thing says Luke chapter 10 verse 19 says, "Behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you." And so there's actually in the Amplified, the way that it reads is, "I have given you authority and power to trample upon serpents and scorpions." And so in this context of overstanding as differentiated from understanding, there is a degree of authority, distinction in terms of overstanding versus understanding is a matter of authority. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. We're dealing with this kind of theme of stand in power and stand over it. And we'll get into what we mean by that as we go along today. But confession, I shared this confession earlier. I'll share it again. I am unapologetically a heterosexual male, a straight male, and I have been all my life. With that being said, I'm in love with a man, and his name is Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. And I say that it's interesting because on the type of path that I've been on and dealing with a lot of the type of people that I deal with in circles of consciousness, some people don't necessarily walk that route. Some people, look and they say, there's Jesus couldn't have actually lived. It was just made up, that the entire story is allegory, that there isn't even a letter J in Greek, Hebrew, or Aramaic, the language that Jesus spoke. That is true. There is no J in any of those languages. In the Greek, that as it's written in the New Testament of the Bible, it's Jesus. You translate that into Latin, and the Latin languages, it's Jesus, spelled Jesus. And the way that English-speaking folks, particularly folks in the United States of America, do is we Americanize everything and we put it as Jesus. I've said before, I'll say it again, there isn't actually any country called Jerusalem. All over the world, people refer to it as Jerusalem, perhaps because of kind of the dominance of the United States. But the actual country is Yerushalayim. There is actually no J in Hebrew. That is true. That doesn't, however, mean that Jesus didn't ever exist and doesn't walk the face of the earth. And even though there can be a ton of allegorical stuff in the Bible, and maybe everything can be broken down allegorical, I have seen in my own personal life stuff that has literally physically happened in my life, simultaneously existing in real time and allegorically, which to me boggles my mind. It blows my mind every time. I think it's really deep, profound, and beautiful. But I will confess to you that along my journey dealing with, and I deal with a lot of different people in different spiritual circles, and hopefully with some degree of grace to be able to reach everybody where they are. But what has been true for me is back in 1994, I made a decision to give my life to the one who had given his life for me. And that is true for me. That's still very much true for me. And there have been times where in this relationship, it's been somewhat more one-sided than others. But I stand here, or I sit here today. I really did want to do the standing up, this message on stand in power. I really did want to do that actually standing up, but logistically, it just wasn't going to work in terms of the streaming. But the more that I learn about this man, Jesus, or Yeshua, the more I appreciate him, the more that I love him, and just really value the relationship that I get to have with him. And through that process, the relationship I get to have with me and the most sacred parts that exist within me. Okay. And so, yeah, and in some degrees in some circles of consciousness, Jesus isn't necessarily considered cool and stuff. And, to each his or her own. I'm just telling you how I roll. And this message in terms of this topic for today of stand in power. And it's interesting because I started off saying about how I'm in love with Jesus. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier this week, at the beginning of the week. They didn't know that I was going to be speaking, that the theme for Transforming Love Community, where I spoke earlier today, is on Overstand It. We've been dealing with that month throughout that theme throughout the month of January. we were talking about the song, and Skip Marley is one of the people collaborating on this song. And from that, we started just talking about the Marleys in general. We talked about Skip Marley. We talked about Damian Marley, or Gong Jr. And we talked about Bob Marley. And then the person brought up actually Ziggy Marley, and then mentioned this song by with Ziggy Marley and Erykah Badu. Interestingly, just as I said that I'm in love with Jesus, and I wasn't even consciously thinking about that within the context of the song, the name of the song is actually In Love With You. As I confess, I'm in love with Yeshua. But interestingly, this person did not know, and they sent it to me on YouTube. And I didn't even recall the song at the moment when they mentioned the song about this collaboration and everything at the time, until I actually checked it out, and like I actually owned that song. But again, the name of the song is In Love With You. And the third line of the song, one day you gonna understand. One day you gonna understand. At that end of, did you hear that? It said, one day you're gonna understand. Okay. Interesting synchronicity there. Again, the person didn't know that was going to be speaking, and that there had been this theme, overstand it, all month. But interestingly, they send this song to me at the beginning of the week. The third line of the song is, one day you're going to overstand. And my prayer is that on this day you may overstand. And if not on this day, that at least a seed will be planted, or a seed will be watered, and ultimately God will get the increase. But we're dealing with this topic, stand in power, stand over it. And I'm just going to kind of share with you the scripture for today, coming from Luke chapter 10, verses 19 through, well, I'm going to start off with hey, J Love and Faith. I didn't see you all here. I'm going to start off with actually verse 19, which reads as follows, and you should be able to see it on the screen here. Behold, this is Jesus speaking to the disciples. He had been working with them, teaching them, training them. He's directing them to go out, interacting with the people. A few verses earlier, he was instructing them about go and heal the people that you come across who are dealing with sickness. Proclaim to them the kingdom of God is at hand. Stay where, with the people who allow you to stay there. Eat what they have for you to eat. If they receive you, wonderful. May your peace stay with them there. If they don't receive you, head on out of there. Don't sweat it. Brush the sand off your sandals and keep it moving. And here we are down at this point where he's again still teaching them, still talking to them, and he's recorded as saying, "Behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy." That's powerful in itself. I give you power to tread on serpents and scorpions, but then this other thing is really powerful. You have power over all the power of the enemy. There is no enemy that exists that has more power than you. You have power over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Okay? I think that's beautiful and profound. We're going to go into some other scriptures a little bit later on, but right now we're going to stick with verse 19 before we move on. We each were created in the image and likeness of God. There's a power in which we were created. There is an authority which we have access to. And I've said many times before on these lives, I'll say it again right now. We were created in the image and likeness of God. When God got done creating human beings, God said, "Behold, is very good." Every single one of us is like a drop of water from the ocean of God. A drop of water from the ocean of God. No single drop of water ought to get so arrogant into thinking that it is the totality of the ocean. However, every single drop of water has within it all of the properties of the ocean. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead lives in you, lives in me. That's some power. There's power. And we ought to be able to stand. And that's why I really wanted to be able to give this message standing up. And if you see me fiddling in my seat a little bit, it's because I want to be moving around. I really miss speaking in public places. I really do. And I look forward to whenever the opportunity to do that again opens up, and I feel like I've gotten the word to actually go somewhere and speak in public. But in the meantime, this is what the situation is, and so this is what we're going to deal with. But we each have a power that is placed within us that there's so much more inside of us than what we so often even allow ourselves to realize, right? What we often allow ourselves to realize. I had an experience just recently where I had to be reminded of that. And I just by the grace of God was able to hear God speaking to me, reminding me of this a couple weeks ago. There's this hurricane called Elsa that was coming through this way. I'm in Tampa, Florida right now, broadcasting to you. There's this hurricane Elsa that was coming through. It was supposed to directly hit Tampa. I'm thankful that I've been blessed to be able to communicate with God in such a way that weather patterns had been changed on a few other occasions in my life. I'm not saying that I am the power, but I am connected to the power. I'm connected to all power, and you can be too. And I remembered this because I did have some concerns, and I remembered this. And when the hurricane was supposed to hit, that night, that morning, there wasn't really anything that came my way. It was much worse during the weekend before, when the lightning was crackling and the thunder was rolling, and you could actually physically feel it. That was before the hurricane even came. This was several days later. And when it was time for the hurricane, there was nothing that came this way. There's a power that we possess. Okay, I told you earlier that this is the context of Jesus talking to these folks who've been walking with him, who've been close to him, who he's been teaching and training, and he's wanting them to understand what's in them. There's power in them. He told, I've given you power to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. That's significant. But yet somehow there are things that happen in our lives. There are things that unfold in the process of our living that cause us to not feel so powerful, that cause us to shrink a little bit, that cause us to allow our light to be dimmed. I've done it. I've done it. I'm sure that you've done it in your life before too. And this isn't something that you need to be condemned about. It isn't something that you need to be condemned about or that you need to beat up on yourself about. It's part of the human condition. There are things that happen in this process of living life as human beings in a physical body on planet Earth. There are certain things that we experience as limitations in the process of that. There are certain things that we experience as moments of powerlessness in the process of this life journey. There are times where we feel disempowered. There are times where we may even feel victimized. There are times that things happen that just don't feel good, that don't feel right, things that make us question, our own sense of value and sense of self-worth. There are times where I'm working with people and teaching them on methods that they can employ to find a job that's going to suit them in this current day and age, because the game is different in terms of how you go about finding a job today. And one of the things we talk about is in our culture, in this United States of America at least, and presumably in other places as well, so much of identity is wrapped up in what a person does for a living. You meet a person socially, and aside from getting their name, the next question that comes out of either your mouth or their mouth is, what do you do? And by what do you do, they typically mean, what do you get paid to do? And then a person's immediate response tends to be, I'm an accountant, an engineer, whatever it is that you do. You don't say what you do, you say what you are. And the word, when you say I am, that's an infinitive of the, that's a conjugation of the infinitive to be. So whenever you say I am, you are saying what you are. You're making a statement of your beingness. And so I encourage us to be mindful of what we put behind the words I am, that we never say I am followed by something that we don't want to materialize or see made manifest in our life. And so people end up in that context, they end up feeling down about themselves when they're not working because they had put so much of their identity into their job. Somebody then asks them what they do, and then they start kind of fumbling and feeling uncomfortable. And that's just one example of how we can feel a little disempowered, how we can feel compromised in the strength of who we are. Okay, there are times where we've experienced different types of abuse. Maybe you've experienced some type of emotional abuse or verbal abuse or even physical abuse or sexual abuse, maybe even from somebody who is supposed to love and protect you. And that can create a sense of, certainly that can create a sense of disempowerment or a feeling of victimhood. Perhaps you've experienced heartbreak. You've shared your heart and had that heart broken, and that made you feel bad about yourself or made you feel somehow undeserving or unworthy of love. Perhaps there was somebody in your life who wasn't there for you, that was supposed to have been, and that's created some kind of feelings in you and that caused you to maybe feel a little disempowered. Maybe somebody's broken in your home and you experience that experience of violation. Okay. And when those types of things happen, we often feel disempowered. We often feel weakened. We feel our system weakened. Literally, whenever we experience some form of illness or dis-ease in our body temple, it's because there's some weakness that's being made manifest in our body temple somehow, actually in our awareness somehow, and then it ends up manifesting in the body temple. Okay. And so there are all of these ways where we end up feeling disempowered, where we end up feeling weakened. And yet, we have Jesus saying here, behold, I give you power. I give you authority. To do what? Let me pull that up again. I'm going to pull it up again. Give me just a second. To tread on serpents and scorpions and give you power over all the power of the enemy. Right? Now, when we talk about scorpions, and when we talk about serpents, these are things that we don't tend to have warm, fuzzy feelings about, right? These are things that feel scary, that make us, they're representing something for us, that which it's hard for us to deal with, that which frightens us, that which terrifies us, that which may cause us to feel deathly afraid, that which can hurt us, can harm us, can damage us, right? Represents getting us in the place where we're vulnerable. Okay. What's significant here about Jesus saying, I give you authority to trample on, or to tread on, or to walk on top of, or to step on, or to stand over serpents. The significance of that is going back to Genesis chapter 3, where in the garden, the serpent approached Eve, right? And told Eve, brought deception to Eve. And that serpent can represent deception. It can represent condemnation. temptation, a number of things that serpent can represent in this context. There are other contexts wherein that serpent can represent, or your way of dealing with the serpent can represent a profound empowerment and transformation. We'll maybe get to that in a little bit, though. In this context, the serpent came and identified a weakness within Eve in this context, presented something in a way that was going to be very appealing to Eve, okay, and then used against her, actually, okay, and that was tempting her to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, okay, tempting her to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and she ended up doing that. Adam ended up doing that. They ended up feeling ashamed in the process of doing that. The way the story goes, that there was going to be problems between humans and snakes going on forward. That the humans would be able to step on the head of the snake, but the snake would be able to bite the heel of the humans. Okay, this is significant. I shared earlier today when I was sharing in the message. There's a story in Greek mythology, and I'm not promoting Greek mythology per se, but it speaks allegorically to a situation. Have you heard of the Achilles tendon or the Achilles heel? Where that comes from, that Achilles heel represents an area where you're vulnerable, area of weakness, an area that's a challenge area for you. Okay, even though you might be strong in other areas. So Achilles' mother dipped him in this pool where he would be, where everything that touched him, everywhere where he was touched, would be invulnerable, impenetrable. Okay. And so his whole body was, except the area where she was holding him to dip him in this water. And that was the area where he was vulnerable. It's an area that plagues athletes. If they get an injury there, it tends to take a while to recover. It's relatively easy to get injured because it is a very vulnerable part of the body. But in this context, the serpent is representing the areas where you would otherwise be vulnerable. And so we have these fear. It can represent that fear of you being attacked, damaged, hurt in the area where you're most vulnerable. And so what do we do as human beings? We do things to try to keep from being vulnerable, right? We put on airs. People, you hear comments about somebody having a strong personality. You know, I mean, that's not actually a compliment, really. Technically, it isn't. Actually, having a strong personality, the root of personality is persona. A persona is a mask. A mask is something representing you as being something other than what you actually are. And if you feel yourself having a need to represent yourself as being something actually than who you really in essence actually are, that's actually coming from an insecurity. So it's not actually a strength. It's actually a bit of a weakness. The real strength, and that's why this title, Stand in Power, it was decidedly determined not to call this Stand in Your Power, because your power has flaws. Your power has inadequacies. I have had my fair share of times where I've tried to do things in my own strength, in my own power, in my own understanding, right? That doesn't work out too well. I've got 2 divorces to show for it. I've got disappointments throughout my life that have happened that I have to show for it. I've got plenty of experiences of times where I was trying to do something in my own strength and in my own power, and it didn't work out so well. And that's why Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding, because your understanding will get you into some trouble. And we're not just talking about understanding today either. We're talking about overstanding. We're talking about something on a little bit of a different level. being able to operate from a place of true, genuine, authentic authority. And so in all their ways acknowledge the Lord, and the Lord would be the one to direct your path. Okay, and that's what I'm really set on doing at this juncture in my life. Okay, because there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end doesn't work out so well for him. There's a way that seems right to a woman, but the end doesn't work out so well for her. And so there's a difference between trying to do stuff in our own strength, where we're trying to manipulate things. And we do that usually because we're having a gap in faith. Okay, we're at a faith deficit, a faith in God deficit. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't things that we need to do. Certainly, faith without works is dead. There are things that we do need to do. There are some areas where we may need to exert ourselves, and that's appropriate to do when God is leading how to do that. But I want to distinguish between the power of God and the power of a human being, because a human being does not have power over things in the non-physical realm. Okay. And in verse 20, that's kind of touched on, don't rejoice in the fact that you that the spirits are subject unto you, right? Okay. Yes, you can have command and authority over things within the spiritual realm. Okay. Over things that would be negative influences. And I don't really want to get too caught up with that part yet. I do want us to, though, be very clear about recognizing our dependence on God. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit later too. But before we do that, I want you to think about what are those areas in your life where there's been debilitating fear. What is that area? What is that thing in your life that you just haven't been able to seem to get past? Maybe it was a hurt of something that happened a long time ago that's still impacting things that are unfolding in your life today. Maybe it was, or maybe it is, some fear that you may have right now, in terms of maybe your love life, or maybe your financial situation, or maybe your ability to make a difference in the life of a child, of one of your children, whatever the case might be. We all have at least one area that we struggle with. What's yours? And I'm going to invite you to say it out loud, just in the privacy of the space of your own space, wherever you are right now. Take ownership of it, whatever that thing is. The area where you're afraid to be vulnerable. The area that you most are concerned, the area of your biggest fear, right? What is your biggest fear? You don't have to put that in the chat. You don't necessarily have to tell another person, but own it for yourself. Own it for yourself so you can take power over that thing, whatever that is, right? What is the area where you feel bad about yourself? The area where you feel most bad about yourself? The area where you most doubt yourself? The area where you most doubt God? What's the thing that is limiting you from reaching your full potential? Where is it that serpent is trying to nip at your heel? What is that scorpion that frightens or that terrifies you, that you think, that you feel deathly afraid of? What is that thing that you feel deathly afraid of? Own it. We're not going to stay there, but in the time being, I want you to own it. I want you to own whatever the fear is. It might be cool to say that you don't have any fears. It's also a lie to say that. A person that has no fears is really more of a fool than a courageous person. Courage doesn't exist in the absence of fear. Courage is what happens. Bravery is what's present when a person is able to stand in the face of whatever that fear is or was and move forward anyway. Okay. And so Jesus is sharing with the disciples, I believe that God is sharing with you and I right now that we are given power, we are given authority. And I hope that this is something we're going to grasp one day. And if we don't grasp it today, then hopefully at least a seed is planted or watered that will bear fruit at some point, that will bear good fruit at some point. But whatever that thing is that has been a hindrance for you, whatever, it may be a particular temptation, it may be a particular thing. There was something that I struggled with for a long time. No matter what I did, I didn't seem to be able to break it. It was very, very difficult for me. I'm thankful for about 3 months now. I've been able to take authority over that by the grace of God, right? The same power that caused the heavens and the earth to appear out of nowhere exists within you. Whew. Does that scare you to think about that? Don't be afraid of that. Be concerned that you're using it from the right place, though. Okay. Be concerned that you're using it from the right place. But right now, whatever that thing is that has been an enemy in your life, and the enemy inside of your own thinking is the greatest enemy that you could ever face, not some external force. There are no external problems when there's complete harmony inside. And that's just the real truth. What is it that has stood in your way? I want you to challenge it right now. I want you to challenge it and count it defeated right now, so that you can be in a position of standing over it, because you know what's been placed within you. And whatever you need to, if you need to just punch it in the face, if you need to karate chop it, whatever you need to do, I want you to see it now at your feet, where you're standing over it. To stand over something is to stand in a position of victory. That's Muhammad Ali when he faced the heavyweight champion of the world, Sonny Liston, who folks thought that nobody could beat. He was 22 years old at the time in 1964. And you see him standing over Sonny Liston in victory. That's a posture of victory when you're standing over something, or when you're standing in that context. And so I want you to see yourself standing over whatever it is that you're facing, whatever that thing is that seemed like that was an insurmountable obstacle for you. All right. Whatever that was, see yourself standing over it. David, when he slew Goliath, he went and stood over him, took Goliath's own sword and chopped his head off. He stood in victory, standing over something that's standing in a position of strength, of power, of victory, of assurance, of confidence. And so whatever that thing is that's held you back, whatever that thing is that you've been afraid of, I want to encourage you to stand in victory. See yourself standing in victory over that thing. Okay? Whether the thing Jesus uses this illustration of snakes and serpents, because there are things that people are afraid of. There are things that people would even be afraid to step on. How comfortable would you feel it going and stepping on a physical snake or a physical scorpion right now? Probably not that comfortable with it. But he uses this illustration to make a point. And yet, he says something significant in verse 20. After he's already said in verse 19, behold, I give you unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, notwithstanding shall by any means hurt you. After he says that, he says, but listen, check this out. Don't rejoice in that. Don't rejoice in the fact that spirits are subject unto you. Okay? Fear is a spirit. And you've not been given a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Stand in that power and stand over that fear, whatever that might be that's trying to debilitate you or hold you back or keep you from being all that God designed you to be. I'm saying this to you, and God is saying it to me too. This is a message for all of us. Okay, but he says, rejoice not in the fact that the spirits are subject to you, but rather rejoice because your names are written in heaven. He's changing the whole game here. Now, you thought that he was changing the game when he gave them command to heal people and empower them with the ability to do that, to give them access to the healing power. You think that he's taking it to another level, giving them authority over spirits. And then he's still taking it to a whole nother place. Like, even though that seems like probably really, really awesome to you right now, don't even get carried away in that. Don't rejoice over that. Rejoice over the fact that your names are written in heaven. Rejoice over the fact that God knows everything about you. And this is taking us to this other place in overstanding. I shared with you a distinction according to Urban Dictionary between understanding and overstanding, but I didn't share with you the definition. The definition to overstand is to comprehend a thing and to have knowledge of why it is what it is. Why it is what it is, and of its place or role in the big scheme of things. In other words, to overstand is to really grasp the bigger picture. And that's what Jesus is doing when he's sharing with them, in spite of all of these other things that you've gotten an understanding of, I want you to understand this. Let this get down in your bone marrow, in every fiber of your existence. Rejoice in the fact that your names are written in heaven. Rejoice in the fact that, in other words, even though I've given you power to tread on scorpions and serpents, even though you've been given power to face your greatest fear, the thing that you feel afraid is going to take you out, maybe. And the reality is that the stuff, there was a saying that we had on our football team in high school: whatever doesn't kill me can only make me stronger. We used to have to say that all the time, as we felt like we were exerting ourselves to the limit. And you've perhaps heard that saying before in your life in some context. The reality is that there have been certainly things that I felt a sense of debilitating fear about. And the fear existed as long as I failed to face it. When I faced it is when the fear went away. The fear no longer then had power over me. I then had the power. And the fear didn't have the power anymore. It didn't debilitate me anymore. So it's only uncomfortable while you're anticipating doing the thing that you're afraid of doing. Maybe there's something that you need to say or something that you need to do that's outside of your comfort zone, and it's the right thing to do. Might not be the popular thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. It might not be what your flesh wants, but it's the right thing to do. It might not be what most people would agree with, but it's the thing that God's saying to do. It might not be convenient, but it's what God's leading you to do. Okay? Once you actually do it, there's a sense of empowerment that comes with it. I know because I've been on both sides of it. I've had things that I was afraid to face, and then once I did, there was just this great, tremendous feeling of relief one, but also there was this tremendous sense of empowerment as well. Okay. But what he's saying is, what I can say is the times I faced the things that I was afraid of, I survived. I survived. It didn't take me out. It didn't take me. And there have been some things that I've drawn on for years because I was afraid to face them. Negatively impacted my life for all of that time. And then I did the thing that I was afraid of, and it had been afraid of for so long. And then I was like asking myself, why did I do that to myself and put myself through that for so long, where I could have knocked this out so long ago? But what he's saying here in terms of helping to get this sense of understanding, that your names are written in heaven. What I believe that God is wanting us to understand is the thing that you feel so afraid of, even if it were to take you out, you'd still be okay. Okay. There's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who they were in Babylon. Everybody was being required to bow down before this golden idol, and these three Hebrew boys, were not down with that. It was not comfortable for them to do that. It was not politically correct for them to do that. It was potentially very dangerous for them to resist bowing down to that golden idol. But they felt the Spirit of God leading them to do something different than what was popular or what everybody else was doing. And they said, I'm not going to bow down. We're not going to bow down. The God that we serve will deliver us. But even, this is an overstanding coming in, even if God doesn't deliver us, we're still not bowing down to that golden idol. The reality is that they weren't delivered from having to go and be put in this furnace, which was the consequence of not bowing down. They were put in the furnace. The furnace was even turned up 7 times hotter than usual. They were put in the furnace, but the heat was taken out the flame. So they were able to go through the fire and not get burnt by it. And this is what Jesus is wanting us to understand. I believe that ultimately this is what God is wanting us to grasp in the essence of the core of our being. That I got you covered. No matter what, if you go the way that I'm leading you, there is a way that seems right to a man, but that's not going to work out for you. It's not going to work out for you, but I'm never going to leave you and I'm never going to forsake you. I've got you covered. I've got a contingency plan for every life situation that you can possibly go through. And even when things are scary and they feel uneasy, you go and I'm going to make sure that you're taken care of. Jesus himself, not too long after this situation, was in the Garden of Gethsemane. Did he feel afraid? Yes, he did. Did he feel anxious? Yes, he did. Did he feel like, man, my people that were closest to me couldn't even stay and hang out with me for the night, my last night with them? Yes. The scripture says that he was sweating and crying blood. He was in a state of high distress. And yet he said, nevertheless, he said, I would love to not have to go through this. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine will be done. I'm gonna face this giant. I'm gonna face this serpent. I'm gonna face this thing, this enemy that I'm afraid of, knowing that even if my body is destroyed, on the third day it's gonna rise back up again. And what is true of you and true of me is that every single one of us, even if what we fear does end up taking us out, even if we confront a person and they do end up leaving or they do end up responding negatively and we get a lot of pushback, even if we do say the thing that needs to be said and then we're chastised or condemned, Even if we do the right thing and in the context of the world, it doesn't work out, even if we've got that sickness and it does end up being what causes us to leave this planet. All of us are going to leave the planet at some point. Every single one of us at some point is going to leave here. But even if that happens, God says, I still got you covered. I've still got you covered. When this earthly building, when this earthly tabernacle is dissolved, I've got another building, not made by hands, eternal in the heavens. Jesus himself said, there's a place for you where I'm going. Because in my Father's house are many mansions. And one of them's got your name on it. I've got one where the walls are made of music. Oh, verse 21 says, as he was telling them this in that same hour, Jesus himself started rejoicing in the Spirit. Say, thank you, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you've hidden these things from the wise and the prudent and have revealed them to the babes, to your children, as it just seems good in your sight to be able to do that. There was a time where I was in seminary studying for a master's of divinity. In my mind, getting trained to do the work of God in ministry. There are people there with their doctorates, the PhDs and doctorates in theology that said that I wasn't fit for ministry and therefore would not be welcome to continue pursuing my education at their institution. The scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees were the people that Jesus had most of the time the greatest difficulty with. They were the learned people, the people who were supposed to know. He said to Nicodemus, aren't you supposed to be a teacher of these things? And you don't even understand this like basic stuff. The reality is that it's not something where we can always get an intellectual understanding. And maybe we do have an intellectual understanding, but it doesn't really take root. It doesn't really take effect. It doesn't really settle in until we really become like children, recognize our dependence on God. I told you earlier, there are a lot of times I tried to do stuff in my own power, and it seemed for a season to work out. I seem to be able to direct things to go the way that I wanted them to go in a lot of ways. All of us are varying degrees of control freaks. Sometimes we want to control other people. Sometimes we want to control situations. Sometimes we just want to control the outcomes. We want things to work out the way that we want them to work out. It's part of human nature. But there are times where we can't do things in our own strength. Spirits can't be cast out in our own strength and our own intellect. Okay? A deep, abiding relationship with God can't be done in our own power and our own strength. There are times where I'm blessed to be able to help people in the area of healing. This area God has graced me. It's an area God has blessed me to be able to learn about in terms of the nature of how the human mind and body interact with one another, and how in terms of the root of sickness and dis-ease, and to be able to affect change in people's lives. But I'm very clear that it's not ultimately me that's doing the healing, but God that's the healer. And there are times where I'm in situations where I know things are beyond even my ability to rely on as a person who's got this knowledge, where I have to rely on God, because God is really the one who's doing the work anyway. God's the one who's doing the work anyway. And I've been blessed to see some profound situations really manifest those times where I was able to step back out of the times I've been able to most step back and step out of God's way are the times where the most profound healings have happened. The most profound healings have happened when I get out of God's way and let God show up. Okay. There's a part I'm called to do, but then there's a part that God does that's beyond what I could ever do on my own. Okay. And so this piece about really understanding that we're really completely dependent upon God, like a newborn baby. depends on someone else. When you were a fetus in your mother's womb, you depended on your mother for eating. You depended on her for oxygen, for water, even for removal of waste, for everything. And if we can be in that place with God, he's rejoicing over the fact that God has set it up this way. Okay? There's simple things that God uses to confound the wise. The reality is that life really is simple, but we overcomplicate them. We overcomplicate things. I've got a PhD in that myself. I can overthink the heck out of something. Give me a topic, I can find a way to overthink it for you. Oh, I'm working on it, and God is working on me, and I'm thankful for that. And every once in a while, I'm able to get out of the way, able to get out of my own way. God has given all of us a tremendous blessing, and a blessing in the form of the word that I got you covered. I'm there for you. I'm holding you in the palm of my hand. I love you, and there's nothing that you can do about it. There's a grace that we're offered. There's a grace that we're offered. Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, came that we might be aware that there's a grace that is available to us. And I invite each and every one of you who's tuned in, who's listening, who watches this on a replay on Facebook or YouTube or anywhere else that it might be broadcast, to invite Christ into every area of your life. A lot of times we say into your heart, yes, your heart, but also every area of your life. Every single area of your life. The area, particularly the areas where you feel fearful or shameful or doubtful or prideful, or you try to do things on your own without any help. That's a difference maker, I'm telling you. I'm telling you. Let it be known unto you on this day, July 18th, 2021, that there's a power in you. And that power isn't just your physical you or just your intellect. I encourage you to invite the Spirit of God to take you over, to infuse itself in every aspect of your being. Welcome the Holy Spirit into your life. Allow Christ to be the center and the director of your life. There are ways that seem right to us, but they don't always work out so well. In fact, they usually don't, even if they are seeming to for a little while. That's part of the deception that was kind of alluded to earlier. It's kind of a setup. Okay? Let's understand the big picture. That when all is said and done, we will have risen and fallen on several different occasions. We will have made some missteps, some mistakes. We would have gotten it wrong on several occasions along the way. But by really totally putting our hearts and our hands in God's hands, our lives in God's hands, listening to what God says say, saying what God says to speak, doing the things that God says to do, going the places where God says to say, go, we're all taken care of. Even though we might get it wrong sometimes. And that's the gift of grace. Now, that doesn't mean we take it as a license to just do all kinds of foolishness. No, that's not the point. But the point is that even when we mess up, God still got us covered. So don't be afraid about doing that. Just do your absolute best to walk with God, the absolute best you can. Spend time with God. These instructions that were given to people who spent time with Yeshua, that had a relationship with him. Take time, invest time with God. Have a relationship with God so you can be really directed and empowered. There's so many things in this world that are difficult for us to deal with. And a lot of times we might self-medicate in different ways. But in the end, that doesn't work out so well because we're still not any more empowered. In fact, we're less empowered than we otherwise would have been. Rejoice in your name being written in heaven. And that no matter what happens, God's got you. That God loves you. And even when you get off track, God is happy to get you back on track. Sometimes there's some pruning that's required. Sometimes there's some redirecting that's necessary. But put your hand in God's hand, put your life in God's hand, and I can promise you, it's all going to turn out to be okay. God bless you. I love you. I wish you grace and peace as you go about your day, as you go about your life, as you go about whatever life experiences shall come your way. If you want to contribute to what it is that we're aiming to do to make a difference in people's lives, we certainly welcome that. You can do so, Cash App, $ Royce F. Thomason. We certainly welcome that and graciously receive that. And we want to provide good content, stuff that's going to really be empowering in people's lives. Hey, Angela Banks, good to see you, my sister. Glad you're spending time with God. We want to really, it really is on my heart to want to make a difference in people's lives and to lead by example. Anything that you're contributing towards that end, it helps to make that possible. And I appreciate that. God bless you all. And I'm just going to say a quick prayer for everybody real quick. Hey, Green Eggs and Pam, good to see you. God, thank you for everybody who's here today. Thank you for everybody who stopped by, everybody who's represented in every home of everybody who stopped by today. We give great thanks on today that we have been given power over all of the power of the enemy, whatever that enemy may be. And usually the greatest enemy is the enemy within a me, the enemy that exists, existing and operating in us, in the confines of our mind, speaking to us that we're not good enough, or trying to get us misdirected and messing with our mind in whatever way. You've given us power over all of the deception, over all of the condemnation, over all of the fear. And we celebrate that. And yet we're reminded that that isn't even the greatest thing to celebrate. The greatest thing to celebrate is that you've got us covered no matter what. You give us the courage to face the things that we're afraid of, knowing that it's not going to take us out. And yet, even if it does take us out, we're still okay. You still got us covered. You still got us taken care of. You still got us in the palm of your hand. And God, I pray that this truth might seep its way into the cracks and the crevices of our lives, those areas where we might still be holding on to some things, those areas where we might still be trying to do stuff in our own strength rather than relying on your strength. Help us to rely on your strength and do what it is that we need to do at the same time. Help us, God, to pray like everything depends on you, work like everything depends on us. Help us, oh God, to have the courage, the determination, the strength to do the things that you're calling us to do, and the serenity to accept the things that we cannot change and cannot control, God, and grant us the discernment and the wisdom to be able to tell the difference between the two. And God, as we prepare to leave the stream today, we know that we never leave your presence because there's no spot where you are not. Heaven, by definition, is the place where God dwells. And God, you said through Jesus the Christ that the kingdom of heaven is within us and all around us. And so let us find that heaven in you that exists and is available for us even right now. Even right now. There's joy that's available right now. There's peace that's available right now. There's love. There's harmony that's available right now. This sustainable state of supreme satisfaction that exists within you is available now. Let us take hold of it in the name and in the nature of Yeshua HaMashiach. Thank you, God. Man and amen. All right, y'all. God bless you. I don't know who all is still here. I see that there have been some people who've been making some comments. I pray that grace and peace are with you throughout the duration of your day and throughout the remainder of your week and your life. And until we see each other again, I wish you peace and love.